Hello everyone and welcome to IP Study Lecture video. Today I am going to take chapter number 3 of grade 7 and the name of the chapter is Decimals. So let's quickly see what are the topics that we are going to cover in this lecture. First of all, we will recall the concept of addition and subtraction of decimals. Then we will discuss how to multiply decimal numbers and thereafter we will discuss how to divide decimal numbers. So without wasting our time, let's start the session. So dear students, let's take the first topic, that is addition and subtraction of decimal numbers. So how we are going to do that? So this is something that we have already done in the previous classes. Let's quickly recall it. So let's take an example for that. Suppose I have three numbers over here, 52.8, 2.57, 43.006, right? So I have to add these three numbers. So how we are going to do that? First of all, before adding, check if these decimal numbers are like decimals or unlike decimals. If they are like decimals, then just add the numbers like as it is. Just remember, put the decimal one below the another while writing the numbers in column A. Next, if the decimal numbers are not like numbers, then you have to convert unlike numbers into like numbers, right? So how we are going to do that? We know already. So simply just write the numbers after converting them into like decimals like this and then add. When you add these numbers, what you will get? You will get 98.376. Now let's take another example to see how to subtract decimal numbers. So like we did this example, in the same way we can subtract decimal numbers. What we have to check, if the decimal numbers are like or unlike. If they are like decimals, just directly subtract them. If they are not like decimals, first of all, convert them into like decimals and then subtract them. So here we can see the two numbers 4.25, 18.68, right? So how many decimal places we have in this number? 2. And in this number as well, we have 2 decimal places. It means these two decimal numbers are like decimals. So now we can subtract them directly. So 18.68 subtracted 4.25. What is your result? Your result is 14.43, right? So I hope you have understood how to add and subtract decimal numbers. Now let's move on to the next topic and see what is there. The next topic is multiplication of decimals. So we will study different cases over here, different scenarios. So let's take the first case. The first case is how to multiply a decimal number by a whole number. So how we are going to do that? So what we have to do, whenever you're multiplying a whole number with a decimal number, just forget about the decimal point in the decimal number. Multiply the two numbers like as if you are multiplying two whole numbers, right? And then by counting the number of decimal places in the decimal number, put the decimal counting from the right in the product. Then this is how you are going to multiply a decimal number with a whole number. Now let's explore this thing. Let's take an example to understand this concept in a better way. Let's take example number 3. So here we have to multiply 5.12 by 15. So just forget about the decimal and consider it 512 only. So 512 has to be multiplied by 15. So if you do so, what you will get? You will get 7680 as your product, right? Now count number of decimal places in the decimal number. So how many decimal places we have? We have 2. So start counting from the right. So 1, 2 and put the decimal over here. It means when you multiply 5.12 by 15, what you will get? You will get 76.80. So I hope you have understood this example, which is telling you how to multiply a decimal number by a whole number, right? Now let's take another scenario, the second case. In this case, we are going to learn how to multiply a decimal number by 10, 100 and 1000. Okay? So in order to do so, let's see some rules over here. Let's read it together. We shift the decimal point one place to the right to multiply decimal by 10. We shift the decimal point 2 places to the right to multiply decimal number by 100. And we shift the decimal point 3 places to the right to multiply a decimal number by 1000, right? So in order to understand these three situations or three conditions, let's take some examples. Let's take example number 5. Let's take the first part. Here 9.65 is going to be multiplied by 10, right? So as the rule is saying, if you're multiplying any decimal number by 10, how many places you have to shift towards right? One time, right? So this decimal place will be shifted towards right by one time. Why? Because you're multiplying it by 10. So what will be your result? Your result will be 96.5. Now let's take another scenario. Let's take second part of this. Suppose you are going to multiply 21.0307 by 100. So how many times you have to shift towards right? You have to shift the decimal place towards right by 2 times. Why? Because you are multiplying this number by 100. So what is your result over here? This decimal place will be shifted towards right 2 times. So what you will get? You will get 2103.07. Right? Your answer will be 2103.07. So this is how you are going to multiply a decimal number by 100. Similarly, suppose you are going to multiply any decimal number by 1000. In that case, you have to shift the decimal towards right by 3 places. Now let's explore this thing by taking another example. Let's take third part, right? So here what you're going to do, you have to multiply 3.6792 by 1000. So how many places you have to shift to the decimal towards right? 3 times, because here we are going to multiply this number by 1000, right? So let's shift it towards right. So 1, 2 and 3. So what is your result? Your result will be 3679.2, right? So I hope you have understood how to multiply a decimal number by 10, 100 or 1000, right? So now let's move on to the next topic and let's see what is there. Here we will take the next scenario. We will take how to multiply 2 decimal numbers. So how we are going to do that? Simply, what we are going to do? Multiply the 2 number like as if you are multiplying 2 whole numbers. In the second step, count the number of decimal places in both the numbers, add them, and then put the decimal number counting starting from the right, and put the decimal number after that many places, right? Now, in order to understand this condition, take an example, right? Let's take an example. So let's take example number 6 over here. Here, what we are going to do, we are going to multiply these 2 decimal number. 6.04, 3.25, we have to multiply these 2 numbers, right? So as I've said, just forget about the decimal places and treat these numbers as whole number. It means what you have to do, you have to multiply 604 by 325, right? If you multiply this, what will be your result? The result will be 196300. So one step is completed. In the next step, what we have to do? We have to count how many decimal places we have in both the numbers. So here we have 2 decimal places. Here also we have 2 decimal places. It means that total we have 4 decimal places. So we will start counting from the right in the product and put the decimal place over there. So 1, 2, 3, 4. So we will put the decimal place over here. So what is your result? Your result is 19.6300, right? So it implies when you multiply 6.04 with 3.25, your result will be 19.6300. I hope this example is very clear to you. Now let's move on to the next topic and see what is there. So our next topic is properties of multiplication of decimal numbers. It's very interesting. Now let's take the first property, which states that 2 decimal fraction multiplied in any order will give the same product. It doesn't matter in what order you're multiplying 2 decimal number. The result will be the same, right? So in order to understand this, let's take an example. So here I have 2 decimal numbers. One is 0.13 and one is 1.4. So let's take one scenario where I am multiplying 0.13 with 1.4 and the result is 0.182, right? Now let's take another scenario. What we will do, we will change the order, right? Now in the second scenario, I am multiplying 1.4 with 0.13, right? So if I do so, what I will get? I will get 0.182 again. So you can see in both the cases the result is same. This implies multiplication of two decimal number is commutative, because if you are changing the order of the number, it is not affecting your result at all. So we can say the multiplication of decimal numbers are commutative. Now let's move on to the next property. So what is this property? It is saying we can regroup them in any order. The result is the same in both the cases to find the product of three decimal fractions, right? Suppose if you have three decimal numbers and you are supposed to find out the product of these three decimal numbers. So you can change the grouping of the numbers and find out the product. In any case, whatever regroup or whatever group you are forming, it won't affect your result. Let's take an example for this. Suppose you are going to multiply 5.7, 4.15 and 2.8. So what I will do, I will regroup the first two numbers, find the product of these two numbers and multiply the product of these two numbers with 2.8. If I do so, I will get 66.234. In the next scenario, what I will do, I will change the grouping of the numbers. Instead of multiplying the first two, I am multiplying the last two numbers, finding the product of these two numbers and then finding the product of these two numbers and 5.7. If I do so, what I will get again the same result, right? So this implies that whenever you are multiplying three decimal numbers, then you are regrouping. In that scenario, if you change the regrouping, it won't affect your result, which means the multiplication of decimal number is associative, right? I hope you have understood these properties. Now, let's move on to the next property. The next property is the product of a decimal number and 1 is the decimal number itself. It's very easy. If you multiply 0.5 with 1, what you will get? You will get 0.5 itself, right? So whenever you are multiplying any decimal number with 1, you will get the same decimal number. This is the property, okay? Now, let's move on to the next property. The next property is the product of any decimal number and 0 is always 0. Simple property. If you multiply any decimal number with 0, what you will get? You will get 0 as a result. So dear student, I hope you have understood the properties of these decimal numbers, multiplication of decimal numbers. Now, let's move on to the next topic. Let's see what is there. Here, the next topic is division of decimal numbers. So here again, we will discuss different scenarios. So let's take the first case. The first case is division of a decimal number by a whole number. So how you are going to do that? So it is saying place the decimal point in the quotient directly above its position in the dividend and perform the division as in case of ordinary number to divide the decimal number by a whole number. Now, in order to understand this, let's take an example. Suppose you are going to divide 21.9 by 3, right? So, as the statement is saying, we will divide this number. So, 3 goes 7 times in 21. So, I will write 7 over here. 21, what I'll get? 0. Then I have at this decimal place. So, I will put the decimal place over here after 7, right? Then I have 9. I will copy down 9 here. Then 9 comes 3 times in the table of 3. So, I will write 3 over here. I will get 9 over here. The result is 0. So, what is your result? Your result is 7.3, right? So, I hope you have understood this example, right? Now, let's move on to the next topic. Let's see what is there. It is the second scenario, that is division of decimals by 10, 100 and 1000, etc. So, in order to do so, there are some rules written over here. Let's read the rules. So, it is saying shift the decimal point one place to the left to divide a decimal number by 10. Similarly, shift the decimal point 2 places to the left to divide a decimal by 100. And shift the decimal point 3 places to the left and so on to divide a decimal number by 1000. In order to understand this, let's take some example. Let me take example number 10 for you. Let's take the first part. It is saying you have to divide 52.32 by 10. So as the statement is saying, since we are dividing it by 10, we have to shift the decimal place one time towards left. So 52.32 divided by 10. So you have to shift the decimal place one time towards left. So what is your result? Your result will be 5.232. This will be your result, right? Now let's take another example. Here the number is 35.15 and you have to divide it by 100. So in this case, how many times you have to shift the decimal towards left? 2 times. If you do so, what you will get? You will get 0.3515. This will be your result, right? Let's take another scenario where we have to divide any decimal number by 1000. Let's take this one. So here we have 4265.07 and it needs to be divided by 1000. So as per the rule, how many places the decimal will shift towards left? 3 times, right? 3 places. So if you do so, what you will get? You will get 4.26507. So this will be your result. So I hope you have understood how to divide decimal numbers by 10, 100, 1000, etc. Now let's move on to the next topic. Let's see what is there. The next topic is another condition or another scenario, that is dividing a decimal number by another decimal number. So how we are going to do that? Again, we are going to do that in 2 steps. So the 2 steps are written over here. Let me read it for you and thereafter we will discuss one example based on this topic, right? So let's read it together. Convert the divisor into a whole number by multiplying both the dividend and divisor by 10, 100 or 1000, etc. depending upon the number of decimal places in the divisor. Very important point, right? In the step 2, what we have to do? Divide the new dividend by the new divisor thus obtained. Now, let's see how to use these 2 steps in order to divide a decimal number by another decimal number. For that, let's take an example. Let's take example number 12. So here what we have to do? We have to divide 72.6 by 0.04. So as you can see here, the first step is we have to decide with what we have to multiply numerator and denominator depending upon the number of decimal places in our divisor. So how many decimal places we have in our divisor? We have 2 decimal places. Since we have 2 decimal places in our divisor, we have to multiply and divide numerator and denominator by 100. So let me write it for you over here. The 72.6 divided by 0.04 needs to be multiplied by 100 divided by 100. Why? Because we have 2 decimal places in our divisor. Now if you simplify it, what you will get? You will get 7260 by 4. Now simply divide it like we used to divide 7260. If you divide it, what you will get? You will get 1815. So 1815 is your answer. So I hope you have understood whenever we have 2 decimal numbers and we have to divide them, the first step is just write them as numerator and denominator. After that, look at the number of decimal places you have in the divisor. Next step, you have to multiply both numerator and denominator depending upon the number of zeros you have, number of decimal places you have in your divisor. In this scenario, since we have 2 decimal places in the divisor, we have multiplied numerator and denominator by 100. So I hope this example is very clear to you. Now, let's move on to the next topic and let's see what is there. The next topic is division of a whole number by a whole number, a non-zero whole number, right? So what it is saying, let's read it together. If dividend is not divided by the divisor completely, then put the decimal point in the dividend and the quotient 2. Now put zeros after decimal point in the dividend until the remainder becomes 0. Now, in order to understand the statement, let's take an example. So let's take example number 13, first part. So what we are going to do? We are going to divide 45 by 2. So how we are going to do that? Let's do it together. Here, you have to write 45 and you have to divide it by 2, right? We know that 4 comes 2 times in the table of 2. Just write it down over here. If we subtract, we'll get 0. Now copy down 5 over here. Now, how many times again? We have to write 2 over here. We have to write 4 and then we are left with 1. Since 1 is not divisible by 2. So what we will do? We will put the decimal point over here in the quotient and then we will put a 0 over here. Now check how many times 10 comes in the table of 2. It comes 5 times. So I will write 5 over here and then write 10. Subtract, you will get a remainder 0. So we will stop the division over here because the remainder becomes 0. It means that your result is 22.5. So what we have done over here, we have divided a whole number by a whole number. We followed the step and we got our answer. So when 45 is divided by 2, what is your result? Your result is 22.5. So I hope this example is very clear to you. Now let's see the next topic. The next topic is another condition that we have to discuss, that is division of a whole number by a decimal. So how we are going to do that? It's quite similar like we did when we were dividing the decimal number by a decimal number. So here again you have to write the numerator as it is and denominator like this, right? Now how many decimal places we have in the denominator? We have 3 decimal places. So what we will do? We will multiply and divide by 1000 because we have 3 decimal places in our divisor or in the denominator. Now solve it. What you will get? 119 000 divided by 17. If you solve it, what you will get? You will get 7,000. You will get 7,000 as your result, right? So student, I hope you have understood this example as well. So in today's lecture, what we have discussed so far, we have discussed how to add and how to subtract decimal numbers, for which I told you, first of all, we have to check whether decimal numbers are like decimals or unlike decimals, and thereafter we have to perform addition and subtraction of decimal numbers. Then we discuss about how to multiply decimal numbers. In that case also we have taken different scenarios. Thereafter we discuss about how to divide decimal numbers. Again we have discussed different scenario. So I hope you have understood the topic that we have discussed in today's lecture. So we will meet you in the next lecture very soon. Till then, take good care of yourself, keep smiling, keep practicing, keep learning.